Welcome and good evening, everyone. It's lovely to see you all for Cyber Youth UK's second event after a very successful launch event during the 23rd Annual Cyber Conference last week. For those of you who aren't aware already, Cyber Youth UK formed recently, and our team consists of British Hindu Cybites who appreciate the challenge of connecting to our rich heritage, roots and culture in the Western world, and in particular the UK. We understand the importance of having a network through which British Hindu Cybites can learn and share experiences together. We are extremely fortunate to have Professor Madhu and Khalid once again. I'm sure many of you here are already aware of how knowledgeable and charismatic Madhu Anna is, but I do want to formally introduce him. Madhu Khalid is an architecture graduate and a popular speaker specializing in conservation and architectural research. He is well versed in fields of art, architecture, heritage, and cultural studies. He has completed his doctoral research on temple town planning and also serves on the government-instituted panel for conservation of temples in Tamil Nadu. Madhu Anna has been nominated as a member of the Academic Council of Tamil Nadu, Dr. De Jayalalitha Music and Finance University. Thank you so much, Anna, for being here today. We're fortunate to have you as our speaker. Today's topic will be on the Thanjavur Periya Kovil, an illustrated talk on the aspects of art, architecture, history, and the agamic representation that the temple is. Without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Madhu.
விண்ணாடும் தேவர்க்கும் மேலாய வேதியனை மண்ணாடும் மன்னவர்க்கும் மாண்பாகி நின்றானை தன்னார் தமிழளிக்கும் தன்பாண்டி நாட்டானை பெண்ணாடும் பாகனை பெருந்துறையில் கண்ணார் கடல் காட்டி நாயேனை ஆட்கொண்ட அண்ணாமலையானை பாடுதுங்கா நம்மானாய் சித்தம் தெளிவீர்கள் அத்தன் ஆரூரை பத்தி மலர்தூவ முத்தியாகுமே. வணக்கம், very good evening to you all. It's my pleasure to be here for this talk organized by the Shaiva Youth UK with immense help and support from the Wimbledon Ganapati Temple Administration. My thanks to both the committees here, both the teams, and it was a wonderful experience having been a part of the Shaiva Manadu that was held here, right here at the same venue over the last week. And yes, I did get to interact with several of the temple administrations here and did visit some of them to give lectures over the past 1 week, and stay at London has been fantastic, and thanks for hosting us. And yeah, without further ado, let me get started with today's session. This will be an illustrated lecture on the big temple, Thanjavur. And so this has been, do I need a mic? I mean, can I just go ahead without the mic?
Maybe good for the you to use the mic, okay. So that.
Okay, so this would be a 60 plus minute presentation, give or take 5-10 minutes this way, that way. So Thanjavur Big Temple, that's exactly how the organizers suggested that I call it, because I'm particular about not referring to this temple by the same name. In fact, anybody can take a guess as to what is the official name that Rajaraja the Great, the man behind the temple, called it when it was consecrated. No. Sorry, no, the temple name. Brihadishwara, no. Rajarajesh, yeah.
Rajaraja,
yeah, that's. Okay, so fact number 1, just forget that it was never ever called as Brihadishwara or its Tamil translation Perudiyar during anywhere near Rajaraja's time. Because of the size of the lingam, the massiveness of it, calling him as Brihadishwara, or the one who is massive in size, and going for a close Tamil translation as Perudiyar happens much later, at least 500 to 600 years after the consecration of the temple. Rajarajeshwaram was how the Rajaraja called it. Rajaraja the Great called it. In fact, that was the tradition till even the 17th century. Whoever was the patron of the temple was named after the patron. In this case, it was Rajaraja. So the temple, or Ishwaram, the residence for Ishwara, as built, as conceived by Rajaraja. That's how each of the individual temple was called. So this, in such case, is Rajarajeshwaram, and the deity inside was called as Paramaswamy. That seems to be a common name to many of the Moolavars. In general, in many temples, the Moolavar was always referred to as Paramaswamy. So, tradition of temple building. We can take back the tradition of temple building to however back in time we can take back Tamil culture. Yeah, we generally start with reading about the Sangam literature when we start talking about Tamil culture or the antiquity of the Tamil population. So if Sangam literature is the widely accepted starting point of understanding Tamil culture or resources for understanding Tamil culture, temple construction, temple building, and a society for which the temple was the center of focus starts right then. Unfortunately, we don't have many examples from the Sangam period, but nevertheless, there are references in the literature which talks about temples to various prominent gods like Muruga, Krishna, Balarama. That's like two different forms of Mahavishnu, in fact, are referred to. And then the regular temples for Devi, Surya, and almost all the prominent gods of the Hindu pantheon. They have all been worshipped very actively in the ancient Tamil society. Temples were built with bricks, with lime plastering, and excessive usage of timber was there because that was when the cities were developing. A lot of deforestation should have happened. So with the availability of timber, that became a primary material for construction. So such temples which were built with perishable materials probably didn't stand long. So we don't really have samples, but nevertheless, references to temples, temple festivals, rituals, architecture, mandapas in each of the temple, having dancers and musicians to sing and dance for the deity, playing of instruments, the recitation of Vedas, all of that finds enough mention in the Sangam literature for us to very safely assume that the Tamil society, if anything, was as much temple-centric, if not more, as it is today. So it has always been a temple-centric society. From the Sangam period, so we have thankfully one sample of what can be conceived as, assumed as a Sangam period construction. If you come to Chennai and if you go to visit Mahabalipuram, you will have to drive down what is called as the scenic East Coast Road. A couple of kilometers before reaching Mahabalipuram, to your left towards the beach, you'll see this dilapidated temple, which is probably one of the good things that ever happened during the tsunami catastrophe. So this temple, which was buried in layers of beach sand, was brought out because the tides came in and it was washed. The layers of sand which was covering it got washed, and that's when this temple was discovered. And going by the material of construction and that the temple was dedicated to Muruga and inscriptions from later period visible on it, we can assume that this has been one of the temples active from the Sangam period. So dedicated to Subramanya or Muruga, right on the coastal front, you have temples during the Sangam period. Now, post-Sangam period, we have references to various temples, and one classic example that I would like to quote is from Silapadikaram, where Kannaki, as a representation of Devi herself, is elevated to the status of being worshipped at the far end of the epic poem, epic opera that it is. And we know how the Chera king built a temple for Kannaki, and the stone for the Mula Vigraham was chosen from the Himalayan ranges, cut and brought from there reverentially, bathed in the waters of all the sacred rivers of India, and almost all the kings of various dynasties then who were active were invited for the consecration. It was attended by kings as far as from Odisha to Karnataka, Maharashtra, for that matter even Sri Lanka. The king from Sri Lanka who visited the consecration, who participated in the consecration, carried back the concept of Kannaki worship to Sri Lanka, which is active till date. That's roughly at least 1700 years of tradition which is still active in Sri Lanka. So worshipping Kannaki in a temple which was built by architects, designed by architects, getting the finest of the craftsmen from various parts of India, some of them even coming from as far as from the Greece. The craftsmen who were employed in building the temple for Kannaki were got from Greece and Magadha country, and many fine craftsmen were involved in it. So it has been one of the finest examples, literary examples of how a massive temple was built right on today's Tamil Nadu Kerala borders near Theni. There is this temple for Devi Kannaki as Mangala Devi, which is still worshipped. So post Sangam period we have enough references. Then comes the Bhakti movement, where you have the Nayanmars on the Shaivite side and the Advar saints on the Vaishnavite side, both of whom were active between around the 5th to the 9th century of the Common Era, traveling around the sacred towns, temple towns, cities in India. Some of them were quite active in establishing the religious traditions also, apart from just being devotees. So they had their own sishyas, they had their own people who were following them and who were brought to the religion. So their primary motive was to take to the people, common public, the concept of God in a language which was easy for them. And in this case, Tamil of course. And they sang some of the best compositions ever on gods and temples and temple towns so far. And we have this tradition which is continuing till date through the Oduvars and the other temple musicians who chant these verses during rituals and services in the temple. So the temple towns that they visited bridged the gap between, geographically also to a great extent. So to say, the kings who came after them, say a couple of centuries after them, took it upon themselves to rebuild temples that were existing during their times. Again, probably very humble in size, built out of materials like brick and lime mortar, which are perishable, and replace them with something which is more permanent, like stone. So that is exactly where the experimentation phase of working with stone, understanding the material, learning the nitty-gritties of working with stone, the load-bearing capacity of stone, quality of stone, cutting it, transporting it, all of that was probably experimented somewhere between the 3rd to the 5th, 6th century, predominantly during the Pallava period and the early Pandya period inside Tamil Nadu. So following the Bhakti movement, we have the Pallavas who are highly appreciated for their contributions for temple construction in Tamil Nadu and parts of Andhra Pradesh also. So they were the first probably to excel the art of working with stone. Granite, which was available in plenty in Tamil Nadu, which is very hard a material, which is very strong, but it can work out wonders and it is long living. So replacing temples built out of brick and timber with stone actively happened during the Pallava period, and there are references to them identifying some of these really important temples, probably sanctified by the hymns of the Nayanmars and the Alvars, and slowly rebuilding them with stone. Following the Pallavas and the early Pandyas, we have the Cholas. Now on the timeline, we are somewhere around the 9th, 10th century, the beginning of what can be called as the next milestone in the long-running cultural history of Tamil Nadu, with the Pallavas and the Pandyas, two very active and ancient kings, losing it to the Cholas, and the Cholas slowly emerged as that one controlling power which was capable of controlling almost major parts of Southeast Asia for close to 2 centuries from them. And of course, after which they had to, they got down to, so slowly there was a waning phase too. So the early Cholas continued the tradition of constructing temples in stone from where probably the Pallavas and the Pandyas left. So fine-tuning the temple construction procedure, going in for mass temple building activities, identifying a place in almost every town, every village, every city that was under their control, and commissioning a temple to be built there. Yeah, predominantly dedicated to Shiva was what the early Cholas and from then on started. Some of the finest Chola monuments belonging to the early phase is something that I would highly prescribe for people who are visiting the Chola country for your next vacation. So if you're staying at Thanjavur, there are a few temples very close by in and around Thanjavur like Tirukandiyur, Tiruchotruturai, Tirupunturuthi. These are lesser known temple towns. You will hardly have anybody if you go there. There are no takers to it, but they are some of the finest productions by the early Chola. Every time you go there, probably you can use the big temple of Thanjavur as a scale to see that this was built even before the mammoth structure was built. So that's how special the early phase of Chola construction is, and we have, say, a dozen of them still existing, so well documented and quite popular. The finesse of sculptures and the cuteness of the temple structure as such, if you don't mind me using that word, is something that anybody would appreciate if you visit the early period temples. So that's how special the early Cholas are. And then you have this illustrious king in the history of Tamil Nadu, Rajaraja the Great, so to say the history of India. So a name which is very, very popular, a name that is synonymous with Tamil Nadu's history, a person whom I should say we should give the credit for having established temple administration as the central point of focus for political administration of any settlement. Because his rule probably in the days when communication didn't exist transcended coastal regions, and it went to nautical miles and then into capturing so many kingdoms. So to manage all of this sitting at Thanjavur probably a network of temples at various levels and identifying the god as a representative of the king himself and making sure that land which is directly proportional to the power that one holds, majority of the land belonging to the village to be administered by the temple were some of the reforms that became popular after his times. So if there is a huge network of temples that covers almost the whole of South India or majorly Tamil Nadu today, I think the credit goes to him. To bring them all into a network and identifying them at different levels, combining them in a line of hierarchy where the topmost power is with the king himself was caused by him. So we will definitely have to remember him as one of the most illustrious kings who has ever ruled south of India. So when he was young, he was posted at Sri Lanka, as history says, he was posted in Sri Lanka because to the Cholas, they could easily capture the Pandyas and the Pallavas in the first 1 century of their rule. Yeah. After them, after the Pallavas and the Pandyas controlling them, a couple of neighbors who were a constant threat to them were the Cheras on the western side, predominantly ruling where today's Kerala is. The Chalukyas, who were to the northwest, where today's Karnataka is, and another massive threat were the kings of Sri Lanka. So even when his father was active, he is posted Rajaraja at Sri Lanka, and he had a good share of time of his early days to be spent at Sri Lanka. So there are various hypotheses put forward about what inspired or influenced Rajaraja Chola to come up with temples being the center of the society. Yeah, they have always existed that way, but again, to make that as the key point in his administration, what inspired him? Or to be more particular, what inspired Rajaraja to come up with one of the tallest structure, which was for sure the tallest when it was built. The Vimana was probably the tallest when it was built. The Gopuram was the tallest when it was built, no doubt about it. And the entire temple administrative setup being so flawless and happening because it needed at least 200 to 300 people to be on its payrolls to continue the day-to-day affairs of the temple. That's how massive it was when it was built. Yeah, to come up with a plan to organize a setup like this, what probably inspired him? That's where we are starting. So before getting into that, So one probable acceptable hypothesis about what inspired him is that yet another lesser known beautiful temple ever built is that of Shiva as Kailashanatha at this very ancient and holy sacred town of Kanchipuram, very close to Chennai, Tamil Nadu. I'm sure this is in the itinerary of anybody who visits Tamil Nadu, the city of temples as it is called. There, tucked away in the outskirts of Kanchipuram, is this beautiful Pallava period gem, which has this very unusual Vimana, really tall and growing tall that way, and which actually makes you feel humbled in front of it. So that's how special it is. And Rajaraja has personally visited this shrine and has given an endowment, gifts to the deity there. And he calls it as Kachipettu Periya Tali. Tali is probably the most archaic word to refer to temple in Tamil. So it was called as Periya Tali, which is the big temple of Kanchipuram. Kachipettu is Kanchipuram. So he himself has recognized this as the big temple of Kanchipuram. So if anything, this particular Vimanam, which was really tall for its time, and the beauty in which the temple has been built, the concept behind the temple construction should have inspired Rajaraja to come up with one of the massive structures which is still a puzzle for its engineering qualities and architectural wonder that it is, which is still a puzzle to many engineers. So, and of course the chosen city was Thanjavur because that was the political capital of the Cholas, and Thanjavur was chosen because it has been an active capital town even before the Cholas came there, even before Vijayalaya Chola, the ancestor of Rajaraja, say 3 generations before Rajaraja, who captured Thanjavur, even before he could set up the administration there, Thanjavur was a very happening town, right at the midst of Kaveri Delta, and the irrigation being so rich, and the soil there being so fertile, and of course, the Kaveri Delta has managed to be the rice bowl of Tamil Nadu for almost a little more than 1,000 years now. So that's how fertile it is. So it was his obvious choice to build a temple so massive right at his capital city, which is Thanjavur. But even before Rajaraja attempted building a temple there at Thanjavur, you have another lesser known temple built by his ancestor called Vijayalaya Chola, dedicated to the guardian deity of the city, Devi as Nisumba Sudini. You can see with her head tilted, she is 8-armed, seated on a pedestal with slaying asuras, Sumbha and Nisumba, two of the demons, they're brothers basically. So two demon brothers, they were being slain by Devi as Nisumba Sudini. This is a very, very quiet ancient temple on the eastern side of the city. In fact, it's called as Kiravasal, where you have a temple to Devi as Nisumba Sudini. If anything, this Devi's shrine predates the big temple at Thanjavur. And even today, for the people of Thanjavur, she is one of the fond deities, and you always see her populated by her women devotees, especially on any given day. So that temple predates the big temple there. And Rajaraja's expansion, we all know about it, almost 2/3 of Sri Lanka on the south, and entire west coast all the way up to today's Karnataka in the west, and north, Karnataka and Andhra and major parts of Orissa and all that put together. And he was only waiting for his son to measure the ocean, go across and capture some of today's Malay, Kadar and all those countries on the Southeast Asian subcontinent. So that's how massive it was. So it was easy for him to build this wonder that it is. Yeah, it is popular for its sheer massiveness. Yeah, it's just massive. That's probably the first impact that anyone gets by the first look of it. That's how special it is. There are millions of photos of this temple taken by people who are traveling probably on a flight, to see it, and in any way, terrestrial, flying up at any level, any time of the day. This temple is photogenic. Yeah, I've known people who travel, in front of the temple, across the temple almost every day, but still for a moment they stand and look at it. That's how captivating it is. So the first feel that anyone gets is you feel humbled. You will really feel humbled. If anything, that's probably the best feel that one should get by the mere sight of the residence of God, the temple that it is. So that's the temple campus. Here you see moat built around the temple because there's a canal that runs very close to the temple, so they have protected it with a moat. The moat construction does not belong to the Chola period. That was done when the English took over the Thanjavur palace and fortified it, because the English and the French had constant trouble between themselves in the Kaveri Delta region. So they had to protect their own cities. So the moat was built by the English that you see here, right there. And so Sri Rajarajeshwaram. This is referred to as Dakshina Meru in the inscriptions. Dakshina is south, of course. Mahameru is this traditional belief that there is a really, really tall, super tall mountain on the northern pole of the earth, which is covered with gold, and that is the eternal residence of the gods. So Rajaraja thought, if to the north you have a Mahameru, it should be balanced, for the axis to be in the straight line, it has got to be balanced with something equally imposing on the south. And so he built the Dakshina Meru. When there is an Uttara Meru, here you have the Dakshina Meru. And this is also referred to as Devalaya Chakravarti, the king of all temples. So these are the two most interesting epithets, in fact, with which the temple is described, celebrated as Devalaya Chakravarti. So Rajaraja the Great needs no introduction. I'm skipping that part. So his list of victories has been composed into lines which are mostly the opening lines in any of his inscription. So the Chola kings popularized the practice of having a song authored by probably the court poets, making a list of all their wars, the victories that they have earned, and compiling all of it together as the opening statement, what is called as the Meikirti or the Prasasti. So probably when the king is welcomed, this is what is read aloud to welcome him, to announce to the court that the king is coming. So this becomes a part of the opening lines of the inscriptions. So all these lines which list his victory will be read out, and then finally, for this king in this year, this donation was given. So this endowment was created by him. That's how the inscription goes. So you have the Menkirti of Rajaraja, and he was active between 985 and in 1014 was his coronation was in 985, and the temple was built in 1010, and it's easy to remember. And he was active till 1014, by when he handed over the rule to his illustrious son Rajendra Chola and retired. But his was a very graceful retirement, is what I would say, because he retired as a devotee of Shiva. For having this powerful king, who could command everything under his control, he became a very graceful senior citizen probably, and he retired to become a devout gentleman and he called himself as Shivapada Shekara, the one who carries the holy feet of Shiva on his head. Shekara, Shivapada Shekara, that's his name, the fair end of his life history. And so the installation of the Kalasam on top of the Vimanam is recorded by an inscription. So that happens in 1010. So we safely assume that that was when the Kumbhabhishekam was conducted. These are the cases where you cannot complete the temple 10% and then go for an auspicious date for Kumbhabhishekam. They should have probably just gotten it done when the Vimanam was constructed and the Kalasam was placed on top, because we see several parts of the temple left unfinished. So it is not a mandate that you will have to finish the entire construction and then go for an auspicious date for the consecration. So if the primary parts of it is over, the Kalasam installation can anyways happen. So this is an inscription which probably tells us that the Kalasam was, the Kalasam installation is there in the inscription. We assume that was the Kumbhabhishekam day. And so the 1000th year was celebrated by the Tamil Nadu government in 2010. So it is called as a Jati Vimana. Vimanas are classified based on the number of tiers that they rode. So any Vimanam which has 4+ tiers, it can be called as an Uttama Jati Vimana. 3 or 4 is Madhyama Jati, 1 or 2 becomes Adhama Jati Vimana. So the number of tiers decide the quality, the superlativeness of the Vimana, and of all the temples that the Cholas built, only 4 temples falls under the category of Uttama Jati Vimana, the best of the or the tallest of the Vimanas that have ever been built. The one being, of course, first one being the big temple at Thanjavur, or Sri Rajarajeshwaram, Gangekonda Cholapuram, built by his son Rajendra, Dharasuram, built by Rajaraja the II, a couple of centuries after Rajaraja's time, and then the fourth one is Tribhuvanam near Kumbakonam, which was built by Kulothunga the third. So you have these 4 temples, of which the first 3 are UNESCO World Heritage Monuments. And the best part is, they are not recorded as World Heritage only for the architectural grandeur or the engineering marvel that they are, but they are referred to very clearly as living Chola temples. The 3 great living Chola temples, because unlike the monuments that you see in other parts of the world, be it like Egypt or Greece or Rome, the classical buildings that they are and all UNESCO World Heritage Monuments, these structures aren't dead structures. They are still living because they are serving the purpose for which they were built. The deity is still in there, and the agamic rules that were framed 1000 years back is still being followed. The rituals are conducted, the musicians sing there, the offerings are made, the Naivedyam is cooked and offered, the deity is decorated. So all the rituals that have been prescribed, that are prescribed in the inscription 1000 years back, still continues. So it is not just the architecture that's heritage, but the practice is also of heritage value. So initially the certification was only the 3 great Chola temples. Then an appeal was made to it because the heritage component is not only the architecture but the practices that are there in place. So later the citation was changed and now it reads the 3 great living Chola temples. That's how special they are. So temples are special, much more special than the other World Heritage Monuments because they still serve the purpose for which they were built. All the palaces have all been, you don't have the kings ruling there. None of these great baths that the kings enjoyed are used as bathrooms, or that's not the case in other monuments, with all due respect to them. But these temples still serve the purpose for which they were built. Sri Rajarajeshwaram, Karur Tevar, one of the Tamil laureates who has authored songs on Thanjavur and Gangekonda Cholapuram, and whose songs are a part of the revered compilation of the Tirumurai, of the 12th Tirumurai with the Saiva tradition. The 11th one has songs on Thanjavur and Gangekonda Cholapuram, authored by Karur Tevar. He is definitely not the guru of Rajaraja. Unfortunately, the BBC ended up doing a documentary which they claim to be very good, say 15 years, 20 years back, and they had the best reach inside the temple and they had the best of the equipments in place, but unfortunately lesser informed resource person. So they just went with whatever was popular story about the temple. So anybody had watched those 4 or 5 part video series on the YouTube might know that several errors have been committed in the content presented there. So here Karur Tevar, I've specifically pointed his name here because by and large, if you go for a Google search, any website, any material will identify him as the Rajaguru of Rajaraja. That cannot definitely be the case because Rajaraja himself in first person declares his Kula Guru as Ishana Shiva Pandita, which is recorded in the inscriptions from the times of Rajaraja. So Ishana Shiva Pandita, a Shaiva Acharya, an authority in Shaiva Agamas, was the one who probably performed the coronation of Rajaraja, taught him a thing or two. Karur Tevar, no doubt, he has visited Thanjavur. He has been active when Gangaikonda Cholapuram was built because he has also visited that temple and have sung songs on the temple and the deity, 11 songs each, both of which are a part of the Tirumurai compilation. But he is definitely not the Kulaguru of Rajaraja. Now coming back to his description of Thanjavur, he calls it as Inji Soor Thanjai. Soor is to be surrounded by. So he says Thanjavur was surrounded by Inji. What do you think Inji here is? Inji as a Tamil word? Ginger? Really? Of course, that's the most popular choice, I know. Would you think Thanjavur, the great city, was referred to by ginger being grown around, cultivated around it? Or was it for the entire circumference of Thanjavur that ginger was planted?
It should be paddy.
Paddy. It's not a crop, okay, if that would be a clue. What else is an identification for a mighty town? For protection?
Walls.
Fort walls. Basically, Inji here means high-rise walls. So the entire city of Thanjavur was surrounded by high-rise walls, and so he says this is a very beautifully laid, a very strong city with such protection around it, and hence he calls it as Inji Soor Thanjai. High-rise compound wall with a moat around it is what you see today, but the wall that you see today and the moat, the battlement parapet, all that is a British period invention for their own safety because they converted the temple and its precincts into a fort for themselves. Yeah. So the architect of the big temple is Kunjaramallan Rajaraja Perum Tachan. Thankfully, we have in record the chief architect, probably a couple of senior architects, their juniors, and probably who can be guessed as the interns also, because each of them there is a hierarchy that they have followed telling about Rajarajan has introduced them all in the inscription, and more interestingly they have also donated for the temple. So I'm sure they should be paid better because they've also ended up donating to the temple. And the best part is Rajarajan went about sharing his titles, one for each, for several of these luminaries who were a part of the temple construction. Not just the architects, but others who contributed for the temple, including his own ministers and other nobilities, were all gifted probably a title because Rajaraja Perum Tachan, that's how he's called. Yeah, so Rajaraja is undoubtedly the title for Rajaraja, but for the king to share it with an architect shows his benevolence, or probably the end product was so good that he didn't really mind sharing his own title. So the gentleman's name is Kunjaramallan Perum Tachan because he is the chief architect, and Rajaraja becomes his middle name there, quite literally. So Kunjaramallan Rajaraja Perum Tachan, he is the architect of this temple, and this temple was completely on the prescriptions of Makuta Agama, one of the 28 Shaiva Agamas. In fact, it's called the Makuta because it's the crown of all the Agamas. And why so specifically that Agama? Because this is the Agama of the 28 Shaiva Agamas which prescribes or gives importance to worship of Shiva as Nataraja than any other form. Nataraja being the primary deity to be worshipped, or the primary or the patron deity to be worshipped, is what is prescribed highly by the Makuta Agama. And several scholars opine that the Chidambaram temple, if anything, should have been based on the Makuta Agama worship, because that's definitely built as an Agamic temple. Because if not for the Agamas, the temples don't have prescriptions for rituals or the architectural detailing, or say for example, what are the devatas who are to be enshrined around the main shrine. Yeah, in Shilpa Shastram will talk about who are the deities and the construction, the iconography for them, how big the shrine should be, all that will be there. But the philosophy part of it has always got to be supported by the agamas. There cannot be a temple without agamic worship in it. Things would have changed over years. I mean, we are talking about 2000 years of history, of which the first 200-300 is not even well documented. So things would have changed over years, but nevertheless, there cannot be a temple, at least in the case of Tamil Nadu, which wasn't an agamic temple. That cannot be the case at all. So here in the big temple, Makuta Agama is the agama, the branch of agama, the particular agama on which the temple has been built. And the deity is called as Rajarajeswaram Udaya Paramaswami. I told you the temple is called as Sri Rajarajeshwaram. So he is the chief god of Sri Rajarajeshwaram or Sri Rajarajeshwaram Udaya Paramaswami, the one who owns it. Udaya Paramaswami is how he is called. Much later, the big temple at Thanjavur, undoubtedly the core was by Rajaraja. After which the Chola capital shifts, after whose time the Chola capital shifts to Gagaikonda Cholapuram. So you don't see a continuous patronage by the other Chola kings. Nevertheless, the later Pandyas around the 14th century commissioned and constructed the shrine of Devi as Periyanayiki or Brihanayiki inside the temple. Much later, you have the Vijayanagara kings who also contributed for the development of the temple. The Nayakas who were ruling from Thanjavur have built the Subramania's shrine today. And much later, you had the Marathas who have come down from Maharashtra, got themselves settled in and around Thanjavur and managed to rule the town for a little more than a century or a little less than a century in fact. So they have contributed by building the Ganesha's shrine today in the temple. So if you want to go for the old blueprint, I think 80% of it is intact. Safely I can assume that 80% of what Rajaraja gave is intact. But in total, other dynasties who have ruled Thanjavur, like the later Pandyas, the Vijayanagara, the Nayaks, the Marathas, have all contributed towards what the temple looks like today. Yeah. So it was probably during one of those renovations, somebody going by the massiveness of the lingam and the temple called it as Brihadishwara. Brihad literally means that which is big, that which is massive. So he's called as the big Ishvara or Brihadishwara, and that became the popular name of the temple. And then you have Perudayar. So that's literally the Tamil translation of Brihadishwara. We know that was the official name starting from at least from the 17th, 18th century, because we have later period Tamil literature on the deity. In fact, we have an Ula on Brihadishwara as Perudayar Ula. So that's a piece of work, a literature that was authored on the temple deity. So that has existed at least from around the 17th century is what we can safely assume. But today's context, ASI has its own nomenclature to each of the monuments that they've taken. So this temple is referred to as the big temple inside the little fort of Sivagangai Park. So I'm very sure about it because I used to submit a lot of bills for the work that I did for ASI for this temple. And the first set of bills were completely rejected all the way from Delhi, telling we don't have this monument in our list at all. Because I just called it as Brihadishwara temple and I sent the bill, so it was completely returned after a month. And I was surprised, so when I reached out to the superintending architect, she said, we don't have this monument, it has got to be referred to as the big temple inside the little fort of Sivagangai. So ASI has its own name today. So just in case, names of temples and all that have been changing, political reasons, social reasons, linguistic reasons, a lot of it had happened. So getting into the temple, that's the master plan that you see. So if you visit there, you would have parked your vehicle on the opposite side of the temple. There's a big parking lot for all sorts of vehicles. You get yourself dropped there, and you have to cross the road to reach this entrance right there. Yeah, the semicircular arch entrance is the first thing that you will see when you go there, and that arch is from the Maratha period. So you walk through it. You walk through it. You will have the first Gopuram, which is from Rajaraja's period. Then you will have another smaller Gopuram, and then you will actually enter into the temple campus. So you'll have to pass through one arched entrance, two Gopurams before you say hi to the Dakshina Meru or the massive Vimanam that it is. And then you have, this is the water body, a canal that has been built much later, of course, not from Rajaraja's time. So that canal runs all the way from there. In fact, Kaveri is near Thiruvayaru. From there you have a branch called as Vennaru, which runs close to Thanjavur. And from Vennaru you have several canals that connects the other parts of the delta. So Thanjavur is, the entire Kaveri delta is full of canals. You just keep crossing one channel after the other. So there is one that runs just abutting the temple wall. The entire length of the wall, you see that water body there. Yeah, it's visible here. So this is the little fort, as ASI calls it. You can see all the green pasture there. That's the little fort, and this is where the Shivagangai Park is. So this is the temple today. Probably the palace of Rajaraja, if anything, should have existed right there. This assumption is very popular for a reason, which I'll tell you shortly. Yeah, that's when Kaveri is in her full force. So there is actually a nice bathing ghat, which is dry almost whole of the year. Maybe a couple of weeks you'll see this scene. So a rare photograph for that matter. Yeah, any angle, any part of the day, it is majestic. So that's a perspective that I'm sure most of you would have visited the temple would have seen. This is an axonometric view by the ASI posted outside to easily identify the structures. So that's the first Gopuram, the tall Gopuram. Then you have a shorter one, the second Gopuram. As you enter, that's where the massive Nandi is kept. Then you walk through a series of mandapams to reach there, right there in front of the sanctum sanctorum, where Rajarajishwaramudaya Paramaswami is seated. That's the tall Vimanam that you see. And as you go around the Prakara, that's the shrine of Muruga to the northwest. And right there is the shrine for Chandikeshwara, northern side of the main shrine. This is the shrine for Devi as Periyanayaki or Brihannayaki. And that's where an imposing bronze of Nataraja is kept for worship. So that's pretty much how the temple layout is today. That's a cut image, a cut perspective as we call it. This is the Garbhagraham. That's the Shivalingam there, you can see. You will actually enter it from here, pass through these two massive cloistered halls, really tall tall columns that you will see. And then mostly we will stand there for a darshan. Or if you can pull some strings, you can go that close. That's how it is. That's where we'll be stopped. And this is where the central shrine is. And that's Rajarajishwaramudaya Paramaswami. The entire length of the Vimanam is completely open. It's vacuum. So it's not a solid structure. I'm telling this specifically because many of us feel that it is a solid structure, but it is not. It is only the stonework that kind of encapsulates the space inside. So what you see there inside is completely bowl. If you get a chance to sneak peek into the Vimanam standing there, or if you can still walk up to the first floor, which you can officially, if you can get the permission in place, you can walk up, which I would highly recommend. If you have somebody, somebody who can do it for you, please use it. Nothing like going up there and actually seeing the Vimanam, the entire space there. Now the question is, why was Rajaraja fascinated about this open space? He could have still filled it with timber beams and made it structurally more strong instead of using so much granite in place and carving that space. Okay, so the Shaiva Agamas talks about three forms in which God can be worshipped. One is Shiva as Nataraja or Kalyana Sundara, Veerabhadra, Bhairava, Somaskanda, where you actually have a form in place. He has a face, he smiles, he has arms, he is seated, he is standing. So it's a very close to human representation that we worship him. So that's one form. The second option is you can go in for the worship of a Shivalingam, which is amorphous. You don't have a specific form, you don't have a defined form, but it is still a form. Then you have the formless. The Nishkala Swarupam, as he is called, he is the formless. Yeah. So the formless nature is the ultimate form of worship. So what starts with a form to which you can relate yourself, develops into a level where you go to the extent of seeing him as the formless. Yeah, so you have the Shivalinga here, who is form/formless, and then up above there, for the individuals who are seasoned, for the individuals who are spiritually mature, you get to see this as the ether space, the space that blankets all the universe around, the space where it's believed that Shiva performs his Ananda Tandava. So Rajaraja specifically got this concept of ether space being a form of worship, the space where the formless cosmic dance of Shiva is performed, that dance which can be witnessed only by people who are blessed to witness it. So Rajaraja brings that concept here as the fifth in list of the Panchabhutas, which is the fifth element in Panchabhuta list. Ether, the Akasha Tattva. So you have earth, you have water, you have fire, wind, and then akasha, which is formless. Nobody had transcended themselves up there to the akasha. By the way, akasha is not this blue sky where we fly. That's not the akasha tattvam. Akasha as the fifth bhuta is what carpets that also. So the sky that's visible is not the akasha tattva. The akasha is invisible in fact. For somebody who had seen it, he will not be seen by others. Yeah, so that's how it is. You merge in it. You don't see and then you come back again and keep going and on. So the akasha tattva is, sky as a translation is very bad in fact. So akasha, if anything, is the ether space which is beyond the sky limits. So that is what is conceived here, because people who worship the Lingamurtam standing there cannot see this. Yeah, so this is a very, very supreme space which is very sanctified, and that's where the akasha is. And the akasha is boundless. It just goes to infinity. If you can walk up to this floor there, you have staircase, you can walk up actually with permission. And if you standing right there, if you stare up, what is measured to be close to 200 feet will seem like it's never ending. That's a play with that your eyes plays with space that is vacuum, the space that which is dark, and that which is super tall. Yeah, after a point you don't measure anything visibly. You just give up, right? I mean, if that is possible for skyscrapers that you see around, this is very divine a space inside, and it is pitch dark. And now of course they have very powerful, nice lights with which you can kind of see how it goes up, but still it will seem like it's limitless. It will seem like it's infinity. Yeah, so that is the ether space for people who can visualize Shiva performing his cosmic dance there, to be witnessed by Devi Shivakama Sundari, and the dance which is attended by all devotees starting from Patanjali, Vyakrapadar, Karikalammayar, Manikavachakar, Jnanasambandar, and all the devotees who have been there to witness it. Yeah, if you can for a moment visualize it happening there, that is the state of bliss. For people to attain that level, Rajaraja has conceived something architecturally. So philosophy turning into architecture, this is a classic example. And I say architecture is special because it is bound by philosophy. Architecture is not about utilizing maximum space. Architecture is not about getting you the best out of whatever piece of land that you have. Yeah, architecture is not definitely about fooling the government and the norms to get the best of best out of what you have. That's not it. It does not get over there. Yeah, so here it is very, very special because this is where nothing else as a design will fit here. That's how specific concept for an architectural development should be. That's the overall plan. This image is just to show you how classical buildings are aesthetic by default. If you ever noticed, be the Athens or the buildings that you see in the city of Athens, or the classical Roman buildings, or what you see here, the Sanchi Stupa, many of them. These classical buildings are aesthetic. They look visually pleasing. That's where architecture comes in, because we have several yardsticks like the golden proportions, or the ratio between the length and the breadth, and prescribed height differences, play between solid and void, play between light and dark. So these parameters which are taught as governing principles for an architectural design helps you get the best for that site. Imagine plucking out the big temple from here and placing it elsewhere in the world. It probably wouldn't have the same impact. That's exactly how a building should belong to the site. It should make full sense only there. It should not be that one solution which is a prototype that can fit anywhere else in the world. That cannot be the case. That's why sun's angle, direction, the light and shade, maximum sunlight that you get instead of the heat, and all that is studied before coming up with an architectural design. So the proportion theory has played a major part in making sure that it is aesthetic always. That's the long running cut section that you see there. That's the first Gopuram, the second Gopuram. As you pass, now this is the tall structure. It is not symmetrical. You don't have a mirror line in between. Still, it is aesthetically pleasing. That's why classical architecture is very special, and it just invites you close to it. You'll feel you would want to belong to it, and you'll start appreciating it. That's how special classical architecture is. So conceptually speaking, right around the sanctum sanctorum, you have the niches in which various gods are placed. 5 of them in the list there form the first avarana, or the first corridor around Shiva. When I say corridor, they are not architectural corridors as such. Imagine Shiva is seated in the center. You have 5 concentric squares around him, and the Shaiva Agamas prescribe specific deities to be placed in the specific direction in the specific concentric square around him. So here you have the Pancha Brahma Murtis, the Ishana Shiva, then Ishana, Tatpurusha, Aghora, Vamadeva, Satyojata. So the 5 forms of Shiva, or the 5 faces of Shiva, are personified into the Murtis with prescribed weapons that they hold, the facial features. For example, that's Aghora Shiva. Yeah, he has eyes that are protruding, and he has a big a mush that he has, and he holds a Kapala Patra in his hand and a trident. So that is the specific description for the Aghora face, or the south face of Shiva. Then you have Vamadeva, then you have Ishana, the north and the east facing. So each of the face of Shiva has certain characteristics, and they are personified into these 5 deities who are placed in the first circumambulatory path around Shiva. So this is the first circumambulation. Now a walkthrough, probably this is where the presentation is going to get you into the temple. So the first Gopuram that you see, I'm not talking much about the semicircular arch there, because that was built during the times of
Magadha.
Wow. Yeah, so the Maratha, I've been a faculty for like 14 years, so this keeps coming up once in a while. So that's the semicircular arch that you see there, so that's from the Maratha period. It's a simple arch with brick and lime mortar, not much ornamental. So this is the first Gopuram, and the name of this Gopuram is very interestingly called, it's called as Keralantakan Thiruvayil. Kerala, of course, the Chera kings, the Kerala state as it is today. Antagan is the one who visits you as the last visitor, the one who meets you as the last visitor. Who is this? When I say last, end of your life. Yama. So Antagan is Yama. This is one of the very fond titles of Rajaraja. He is called as Kerala Antaka, the one who gave the finale for the kings of Kerala, or the entire Kerala as a political denomination. So he managed to bring the sovereign state of the Cheras once and for all down. If you ever wonder why are we not reading much about the Cheras or the Chera temples or Chera contribution as such, probably Rajaraja is one of those important reasons for that. So he's in fact called as Keralantaka. So that was the first victory after his coronation. Of course, he managed to bring several other parts of the world under his control before that, but Kerala was his first victory after coronation, after becoming the king. So this became his chosen title for the Gopuram also. So it's called as Keralantakan Thiruvayil. So it was probably the tallest Gopuram when it was built, and I personally feel it was the first ever Gopuram built. I'm not sure if a Gopuram which preceded it exists today. So of all the hundreds of Gopurams that you see in the skyscape of Tamil Nadu, this incidentally is the oldest. So next time when you walk through it, you can recollect that this is the oldest standing Gopura. Yeah, so you walk past it. I mean, look at the uniformity in the construction, the color of the rocks. Yeah, I mean, he was the authority, he was the power. He could have just chosen to come up with any colors to finish. It's after all a compound wall, the side wall. Who is even going to look at it? But that's where the craftsmanship comes. At frequent intervals, you have those architectural elements, yeah, which projects, some recedes. So it is punctured at frequent intervals for the aesthetics part of it. It's so straight in nature, and thanks to ASI, they've been doing a good job in maintaining the temple campus as it is seen. But even without them, 1,000-year-old structure to maintain same texture, same color, and in such perfect geometry. Yeah. So that's Keralantakan Thiruvayil. It's done out of stone for the first 3 tiers, and then they have used brick and lime mortar. And renovation under the Nayaks. There was this illustrious king called Shevappa Nayaka, a Nayaka king who was ruling from Thanjavur. If you associate a lot of cultural parameters of Tamil Nadu with Thanjavur, be it music, dance, traditional food, veena, several of those parameters, cultural aspects of Tamil Nadu with Thanjavur, he was probably the reason. So it was during his time these arts were all highly patronized. So it was during his time one massive renovation for the temple has happened. That's when most of these structures were renovated. So you see a lot of Nayaka period influence on the artistic component. I mean the paintings, the stucco images, all of it has very Nayaka influence in it. This is the view after you cross the first Gopuram. Yeah, that's like from other angles, Keralantakan Thiruvayil. Interestingly, this Gopuram on top, both these Gopurams are accessible. You have well-laid steps inside, you can walk in. Has 2 shrines. A Gopuram on top has 2 Sannadhis. Yeah, one dedicated to Shiva as Dakshinamurti, facing south, and the other on the other side, facing north, dedicated to Brahma. So two of these deities are enshrined, which only proves the Shaivagamic fact that a Gopuram is not a mere entrance, it is a face of Shiva. The very look of Gopuram is Shiva himself. Yeah, because we believe that the concept of Shiva, the essence of Shiva, is not limited to the sanctum sanctorum. It's not limited to the lingam installed in the center. It is there in the Vimana, it is there in the Vimana Kalasha, it is there in the Gopuram, it is there in the Sthala Vriksham, it is there in the priest for the day, it is there in the bowl of Vibhuti that the chief priest holds in his hand. So, all these are to be looked upon, all of them are to be looked upon as Shiva themselves. That is exactly why this very high regards for the priest, especially when they are in the temple and doing the rituals themselves for the day. So that's how special they are. They are nothing less than Shiva himself. That's how we look at them. So that's the interior, a black and white image. So this is like shot from below. And so these are the steps that you climb up. Very tedious risers. It's not a comfortable climb, but that's what can be done in the constrained space. So that's how the interior of it looks from below the ground, from the ground level. These are British archive photos. The second Gopuram is Rajarajan Tiruvayil, comparatively small, it's only 3 tiers, close to, but what is popular of this Gopuram is the Dwarapalakas. I'll go to the pictures. Yeah, so that's how it looks. The second Gopuram, as you approach it. And there you see these two mighty door guardians, the pair there, yeah, extremely well done sculptures. They're just commanding. The moment you see, again, you'll feel humbled. They are like these super powerful doorkeepers, yeah. I mean, you might be a good friend of probably the one who is living beyond the doors, but still, you know, when you pass through them, you'll have this light sense of, you know, hi, how are you? I mean, you don't meddle with them, yeah. You just walk in safely. So that's how they look. They are the door guardians of Shiva, and their mudra, the facial features, and all that is just brilliant. The second Gopuram, as you go in. So this Gopuram has a beautiful parapet space right there. Yeah, what you see as a projection, the first tier of the Gopuram, that's not a part of the rest of the Gopuram. In fact, if you take a section, this Gopuram is in 2 parts. This tall part, that's one thing, and the lowest is an individual parapet. So right between these 2 parts, you have a space, you can walk all around the Gopuram. The entire superstructure there, if you can climb up here, just inside the parapet wall, you can walk all around. But because of the height and the way it is built, it looks like it's a part of the actual Gopuram. Yeah, so this is a separate entity and this is a separate entity. So you walk in. So the architecture and the pleasing part of it is because of the proportions that they have maintained. The dramatics in space and void that they have followed. Yeah, so it's, if you take a close-up look, that's from where it starts. That's ground level. This is probably the first level, and then you have a 2-inch recession, and then you have the next level there. Then there is a probably 1 foot raise, yeah, and then there are like several projections. So we just pass through them, but if you can just next time just stand there for a moment and look at the projections and recessions that they have followed, that is the architectural dramatics that makes it very appealing and pleasing. Yeah, so we have features like rhythm in stone, we have features like symmetry, we have asymmetry, we have balance, proportions, hierarchy, and all that has been used as tools to come up with this design. Yeah, so if you think this is random, well, not, definitely not. All of this has prescribed, these are all suggested in the Shilpa text. So, you know, the lowmost should be only so many inches tall and so many inches wide, and then the next one can be probably of this thickness, and then the next one is of this thickness. So the proportioning system is all in place, and that's how they look pleasing. Right on top of this Gopuram, you have Shavapanayaka there, standing in reverence, and that's Shiva with Devi on his laps in the pose of telling her or revealing the Shaiva Agamas to her. So that's how the Shaiva Agamas were revealed to us. Shiva revealed them to Devi first. So you can see her with her right ear faced towards Swami. So as he sermons, she is the one who is consuming it first. And from her, it reached Nandikeshwara, and from Nandi, the Shaiva Agamas reached all the way up to us through the lineage of Acharyas. So that's Shiva sermoning the Shaiva Agamas to Devi. As you walk in, this is a British period renovation that they have done. Yeah, I mean, conservation is according to me, to be very, very region specific. Undoubtedly, the Britishers have done immense job in documenting these structures and identifying them, helping the local population understand the heritage value of it. And in the case of the big temple, till such times that the British epigraphists came, learnt Tamil, learnt how 10th century Tamil looked and deciphered the inscriptions. For long, the local people thought that it was built by a random Karigala Cholan, or another popular theory was that it was not built by human beings at all, it was built by UFOs and the aliens that have built. Unfortunately, those are strong beliefs even today through YouTube, thanks to YouTube and random YouTubers. So, that's how it was. So, thanks to them, this is really to be appreciated. But this renovation in stone is something that they were not probably aware of. Because stone granite especially as a material was not very popularly used during their times. And so, using lime plaster and granite. So, that's why I say conservation principles have got to be region specific. Yeah, even today in India, most of the buildings that dominate the list of archaeologically special buildings are all in the north of India, where granite is not the most popular material. So the handbook suggests more on lawn maintenance and the pedicured gardens and the trees that are suggested, and the best way to maintain sandstone or other materials, marble and other materials, but granite I don't think has been recognized to the extent it is to be. So region-specific norms in conservation is definitely needed. But nevertheless, for all the cracks that it had developed, the beam had developed way back when the ASI had taken over and the British conservationists worked on it, they've come up with a structure, the arch that you see there. Yeah, anywhere you see a semicircular arch in India, you can be for sure it's a Victorian touch. Semicircular arches were never ever used in India till a couple of centuries back, till the Victorian architects started designing buildings there. So semicircular arch is not Indian. So the moment you see it in any Indian structure, you can be sure. So this is a British period addition to the structure, and as you walk in, so the corridor that you see all the way around, it's there for the entire perimeter of the internal compound wall, and it is actually two-storied. This is a special feature in Shiva temples of Tamil Nadu that you will see. The entire circumference will have 2 stories of corridors, and this is like the multi-purpose space. You see Vedic schools conducted there. You have an Oduar training the students in Tirumurai. That space can double up for that also. Places where the Devaradiyas practice their dances. In fact, till date, you have a space being used for drying paddy, storing paddy from that's just been cultivated from the temple lands. So it's a multi-purpose space, clearly multi-purpose space. And some historians also argue that probably the Devaradiyas used to stand there and shower the deity as he goes in a procession with flowers, and so that's also a possibility. So that's a multi-purpose space. This was in fact endowed by Krishnan Raman, the illustrious minister of Rajaraja. Yeah, so that's there, and you have 4-sided entrance, and the northern entrance is in fact called as Anukkan Thiruvayil. Anukkan as a Tamil word means a very revered, respected umbrella. The umbrella that can be used only by the gods and the kings. So when that comes out, the Venkotrakudai as we call it, as a sign of royalty, as a sign of sovereignty and all that. So when that comes out, you will have to bow to it. It is as much as the king, it is as much as the scepter, it is as much as the crown of the king. So this was the vassal through which the king walked, and this is probably the entrance through which Rajaraja himself walked. On top today you have this inscription which says Swasti Shri Vikrama Cholan Thiruvasal. Not sure as to how Vikrama Cholan came here, but that's a Chola period inscription which is very easy to read if you know Tamil. That just says Vikrama Cholan Thiruvasal. Entire length compound wall patronized by the minister. So that's the 2-story compound wall. The generator is of course ASI job. Yeah. Out to the temple. So the sub-shrines here, interestingly, Rajaraja's period had several deities who were a part of the interior corridor, but many of them have gone missing. There is a Ganesha in the southwest corner from Rajaraja's time. Unfortunately, he is not in worship because a part of his hand was severed. So the murti, which is generally broken, or a murti which is not in its full, is not to be worshipped. So the deity, fortunately, is still there. He has not left the temple. He is still there. But much later, the Marathas have added a new Ganapati shrine in the temple. So if you go to the temple next time, there is this happening Ganesha shrine which is full and which is in worship just behind him. Say 20 feet behind him, in the corridor, you will see a Ganesha in a quiet corner. He is the Ganesha from Rajaraja's time. A very cute name he takes. He's called as Arunmudi Vinayakan or Arunmudi Pullayar. Arunmudi is the name of Rajaraja. In fact, when he was born, that was the name given. So Arunmudi Pullayar is how he is called. So and then you have there existed a shrine for Muruga, which is not there anymore. The present day Muruga shrine is by the Nayaka kings. There existed a shrine for Devi, because the inscription says the shrine for Uma Parameshwariyar was built by Rajaraja. That's of course Devi, undoubtedly. So all these 8 deities prescribed in the Shaiva Agamas, who are to be enshrined in the second and the third corridors around Shiva, are also in place. So they are there. Yeah, they're there for the second corridor. And then the third corridor you have the Ashtadigbalakas. Sorry, the fourth corridor you have the Ashtadigbalakas. The third corridor is where you have shrines for Ganesha, Chandikeshwara, Nandi, Devi, and all these primary Shaivite gods who are part of the Shiva temple. So they are all there to be in the third corridor. Fourth corridor is for the Digbalakas or the directional gods. Yeah, for the east you have Indra protecting the direction. To the southeast it's Agni. To the south is Yama. To the southwest is Nirdi. So in any temple ritual that you see, when a kalasam is probably installed, all around the kalasam, the 8 directions, if possible, they'll install smaller kalasams where these deities are invoked. If not, just a tambulam will be kept and the deity will be worshipped there. Yeah, so that's like a mandate. When we perform any ritual, for that matter, Sandhya Vandanam or any ritual that we perform, we pray to all the 8 gods who protect us from the 8 directions, right? So all of them find a place in the temple. Some of those shrines are still there. That's Arunmudi Vinayakan. Yeah, so the right arm, as you can see, is severed, so he is not in worship, but he is the one from Chola period. That's Agni, the god of fire, who is still in the temple. Some of these Digbalakas, the directional gods, have gone missing. Some of them are still there, one of whom is Agni. You can see he is generally to be represented as this wise old man with an overflowing beard and the Jata Makutam, and he sits holding the Amrita Patram because he is the god of Yajnas, fire service, fire worship and all that. That's how he is to be depicted. That I think is Ishana, the god for northeast. You can see he's also unfortunately amputated, but the Murti is at least there in the temple. He's not in worship, but the deity is still there for us to see. So the 8 Digbalakas, all of them are accommodated in the temple. That's a very, very beautifully done shrine for Chandikeshwara, the chief attendant of Shiva. He plays an integral role in Shiva temple. His command is probably just next to Shiva. So any orders to us is through him from Shiva. So we are supposed to go and get it from him only. That's exactly why when you finish your darshan, you go to Chandikeshwara shrine and you mark your attendance there. Yeah, so he is the one who gives us the Shiva Prasadam. It is through him that we reach Shiva. The same reason why, as tradition goes, any donations given to temple will never be handed over to Shiva, because Shiva's hand can never go this way. Yeah, if anything, he's always there to bless it. So any donations made to the temple is in the name of Chandikeshwara. He is the chief accountant. That's exactly why traditionally in any Chola period temple, if you notice, the inscriptions which documents the donations given to the temple will start from somewhere near the shrine of Chandikeshwara. And in the case of Thanjavur, the first inscription about the big temple is right in front of him. Yeah, the very first inscription which documents the act of documenting donations happens in front of him. So he is the accountant, very clearly. So the account books, the records are all to be with him. So the inscriptions always start with him. That's the shrine. You climb up through the fleet of stairs there and then you go in. The Chandikeshwara is a beautiful murti for that matter, with his Jadabaram and the axe that he holds in his hand. So that's the Dakshinameru, the superimposing Vimanam there. And this is a Vimanam which stands on 2 walls. So when you go there, you will have a darshan of Shiva. There will be a wall just behind the murti, right? You come out and when you go around the temple, from the outside, you will see another wall, right? They are both 2 different walls. So the Sanctum Sanctorum has 2 concentric walls, yeah, and there is a clear 6 feet space sandwiched in between these 2 walls. So this is exactly how they've managed to build this huge tower, because from the exterior wall, you have the sloping wall, the stone roof resting on the exterior wall, which goes slanting like that, the sloping roof. From inside, you have a vertical rise. The internal wall has the support right somewhere at the 2/3 height of the Vimanam. You have a completely, it's like a well, yeah, the well there that runs all the way up. So if this is the internal wall, the external wall rests like that on it. Somewhere in the middle, it meets it. So this is how they have managed to structurally support this massive stone work that it is. Yeah, so it is not a single slanting wall. No wall this tall can be built with a slope there. You need some support. So that support is from the internal wall, which rises all the way up vertically. So that's how the load structural load has been managed. It has several images on top of it, and during the Nayaka period, a lot of renovations have happened. So you see several deities, several scenes from Itihasas, Puranas, all of it there. The Garbhagriha is a clear 20 feet by 20 feet, as in the internal dimension, it's 20 feet by 20 feet. Yeah, so that is the space in between, as I told you. This is the internal wall, that's the exterior wall. So we will have a darshan, say standing there. We will come out, and this is the wall that you see when you walk out. But when you stand in and have a look at Perudayar, the wall inside is different. So that's like two walls, one next to another. That's only the Garbhagriha. So as you walk, yeah, we will be stopped right there. And from here, you have the darshan of Perudayar. And if you are curious to know what happens in the internal wall, that's where the most precious of Chola treasures today exists. What are they? I'll come to them in a while. So the internal chamber has several murti, 3 images of various gods. On the southern side, you have this image of Shiva with a trident and a sword. The western side has this multi-armed Nataraja performing what is called as the Sandhya Nrittam. Shiva performs dance during various times of a day, different times of the day. Early morning from sunrise all the way up to sunset, and much beyond that he performs dances. Each of it has a special name, each of it has a special character. So this particular dance form is what he performs as the sun sets. It's called the Sandhya Nrittam because when the daylight seals itself and the darkness starts spreading, that's the time that the living beings tend to get a little disturbed. Yeah, the sense of insecurity flows in them because till then it was bright and it was light and bright, so you felt very secure. And as the night sets in, so in order to prevent the element of fear during that occasion, Shiva performs what is called as Sandhya Nrittam, and it is a beautiful, graceful dance promising you to be that you're safe. And so this particular dance image is positioned on the west wall. So if you're really lucky to be there as the sun sets, position yourself as far as you can go from the Vimanam on the western side, on the rear side of the Vimanam, which is the west. Yeah, just go hit the compound wall, and from there, if you can see, a part of this image is actually visible. So he'll be bathed in the rays of the setting sun, and it is one sight to relish. Yeah, if you're there in Thanjavur in the evening time, never miss this darshan. Not many know about it, but if you can just bother yourself a little by climbing up the nearest pedestal or the stone wall there, you can actually see, you'll have to focus towards the Vimanam. Maybe this one real large entrance on the west wall. If you're lucky, you can get a sight of a part of this Shiva at least the crown and the face on which the sun's rays fall. It's like molten gold, and he's just there, bathing in the setting sun, and so that's the Sandhya Nrittam as he performs. And on the other side, the northern side, you have Devi as Manonmani, 2-armed, and the beautiful looking form of Devi. That's the platform on which the sanctum sanctorum stands. So unlike other cases where you have the sanctum sanctorum planted on the floor, this temple, he has specifically, to make it more dramatized, entire structure, the sanctum sanctorum and the mandapas and all of it stands on a high-raised platform, close to 4.5-5 feet tall, really tall. So there is no way you can see it at eye level. You will have to bother your neck a bit to get the full glimpse of the Vimanam. So it stands on a raised platform like that. And look at the kind of design that they have gone in for the prakar, the raised platform. So you have these cornices, and then you have the lotus petal like shape, and then you have a row full of yardis, yeah, on which you have the first base, the second base, and that's the second, the third level on it, and then so slowly, each of it keeps adding, and the ornamentation detailing is always seen there, and the sculptors call it by different name. The first row there, row full of yardis, it's called as Prati Vari. Vari means a line. And then you have the Vriddha Kumudam, because this looks like the petals, the petal of a lotus, the lotus petal which is curved. So it's called the Vriddha Kumudam. And then you have, the next one is called as a Kambu, and then you have a Padmam, which is also a lotus flower. And then you have the Kambu again, and then the Upanam. So each of it has a name, and the proportioning system is in place. You cannot alter it, you cannot change it. That's how stringent the rules are. Yeah, more detailing. That's the sprout through which the Abhishekam water flows. I mean, if I can just say so, it is basically for the water to flow through the ground and reach the drainage through which it's going to be taken out. Yeah. So there they have gone in for this beautiful looking Bhuta, a very cute looking dwarf assistant of Shiva, the Bhuta Gana. He's playing a trumpet, a conch, in fact, he's blowing a conch there, yeah, holding in his hand, and he also doubles up as the structural support for the otherwise extended channel there. Yeah. So that's projecting itself, and it's made out of stone. So it needs some support. But all that it needs is a piece of stone there on which it can rest. But this is a Chola architect. He wouldn't just get away with balancing it with a block of stone there. So he's ended up creating a Bhutakanam in service of Shiva, of course. So he'll be more than happy to carry the channel through which the Abhishekam water of Shiva is flowing. And he's sitting there happily playing a conch. So this is the detailing which makes the Chola sculptors very special. Three entrances at the for the sanctum sanctorum. You've seen the external wall has three entrances, and any of it you walk in, if you get a chance to, you will get into the secret chamber, the sandwiched space in between. And then you have the external niches around the shrine, the sanctum sanctorum, where there are many gods, many forms of Shiva in fact kept. And then you have architectural members like Kumbha Panjara. Toranam is this arch above any niche. So each of the deity will be kept in a niche. Now here again, when you go around the Ganesha shrine, on all three sides you have a niche on which you have, each of it has a deity, right? A form of Ganesha probably. And right on top of the niche you will have an arched entrance. Yeah, so that's the arch gateway to that particular small niche. That's called a Torana, and you see that. And at the first floor level, yeah, so if you can manage permission from there, I'm insisting on this because I'm sure some of you can get. So if you're going there, just don't get done with the temple at the floor level, but if you can ask somebody for a permission, which is actually easy to get if you can manage somebody, they can walk you up, and you will actually enter the roof from somewhere there. Yeah, as you go in, this is the first floor level. You walk in, you will not be standing on the lingam, but a few feet away from the lingam, but at a raised first floor level, and that has an entire circumambulatory path around it. So that's the roof of the secret chamber I told you, which is the ground floor level. If you can go up there and go around it, you are actually doing a pradarsanam of the formless form of Shiva. Because there you don't see a deity, it's just open. The room there is vacant, it's empty. You don't get to see the deity there. It is just formless Shiva. So probably it was very exclusive for only the sadhakas who reached that level to envision him in the formless had access, we are not sure. But today, yeah, people who can get an access, but go there, there will be no deity there, but you will be going around the shrine, which is pradakshanam for the formless aspect of Shiva. And when you go around the sanctum, the first floor of the sanctum sanctorum, up there, the vacant space I told you, all around the walls you will see poses of dancing poses, what are called as the Karanas, which is prescribed or described in the Bharata Shastra, Bharata Muni's Bharata Shastra, which is believed to be given to him by Shiva himself as the grammar book for Bharatanatyam, wherein he describes the various possible postures in which you can pose. Yeah, it's a different combination of arms, legs, the way you hold it, the bend in the hips, the bend in the knees, and then the neck as it flows. Yeah, so 108 such well composed, aesthetically good looking postures are prescribed in the Bharata Shastra. So here at this level, none but Shiva himself performs all the 108. It's a very rare collection in fact, but for whatever mystic reasons, we don't have all the 108 in place. We have only 81 of those Karanas in place. The remaining 27 odd Karanas, you have the space for it. You have stone planks kept there for it, but it has not been sculpted. One of those unfinished parts of the temple. We don't know why it was never attempted to finish, but you don't have the remaining, they've given space for it, but it is not sculpted. So, but 81 of those Karanas can actually be seen there. And if you can carry a copy of the Bharata Shastra with the slokams translated, you can appreciate each of it. Where the slokam describes your pose, your neck, your hip, your knees and the hands, the mudra in your hands. So all that is described. So you have Shiva himself performing it. Apart from Thanjavur Periya Kovil, you also get to see the Karanas in all the 4 Gopurams of Thillai Nataraja Swami temple, Thiruvannamalai Arunachaleshwara temple. So these temples also you see them. But in all these temples, it's a random danceuse who is performing. But it is only in the big temple at Thanjavur, you have none but Shiva himself performing it for us. At the first floor level, this is the treasure that I was telling you about. The ground floor level, the secret chamber. This is the treasure that I was telling you. These are not random calendar paintings, but these are frescoes from the time of the Cholas. Painting as a form of divine art has been active in Tamil Nadu. We have paintings from the Sangam period being described. We have paintings done by the Cholas. You have paintings by the Pallavas. The later period, Vijayanagara kings, Nayaka. So they are all there. All around India, or for that matter, entire Asian subcontinent, I would say, you have schools of paintings that existed as a part of temple tradition in all the countries here. And this one is so particular because only in the big temple you have few samples of these paintings which are still alive and active. Yeah, they are extremely delicate. In fact, this little space, the sandwich space I told you, is maintained with clinical precision, and they're very particular about the lighting that goes into it. I mean, of course, they're very, very particular to the people who walk in, and so no photography permitted because a flashlight can, kind of dull the image there. So even getting close to it to breathe, yeah, the carbon dioxide by itself will have its impact. So the temperature is monitored. It is very, very delicate and quite clinical. The space is maintained because there are 4 or 5 of those paintings that are existing. If anything, in the long running history of Tamil Nadu, this is the only place where you get to see Chola paintings, and each of them are masterpieces. You have the entire life history of Sundaramurthy Swamigal painted there. It's one of my most favorite paintings ever done of Swamigal. So the entire life history of very dramatic life that he had. So all the key events brought it together in a way of storytelling, and painting that in a space of constraint is no easy deal. And these paintings have existed from the 10th century, active till around the 16th century, when I was telling you about the Nayaka period renovation in the temple, right? 1700s. They thought that these are old paintings that needs to be redone, and I mean that's how we all work, right? I mean, once something gets old, we think it's old and you replace it. So they just conveniently plastered these paintings, got the paintings plastered and made new canvas for themselves and painted over them. Yeah, so the Chola paintings were forgotten for good and nobody thought about it. It was all over. We even forgot that this was conceived by Rajaraja. We didn't know who the king was. We didn't know anything about the temple. We forgot it. And the paintings waited there till a dramatic reappearance in 1926-27 when a random researcher by name Professor S.K. Govindaswamy, a student of, he was doing his MPhil then, a research scholar doing his master's in philosophy, affiliated to the Annamalai University in Chidambaram. His thesis research was on Chola period paintings. Believe me, there didn't exist any Chola period paintings. So his hypothesis was, if there are any samples of Chola period paintings existing, they should be here at the big temple. So one fine evening, equipped with a lantern, a dull burning lantern, he walked around the temple, the length and breadth of it, measured it all, and didn't find any paintings. So he came in front of the sanctum sanctorum to see 2 large steel doors on the sideways, completely sealed and closed and rusted. Curious as to what was happening behind it, the priest didn't have an answer. Nobody knew what was happening there. Then he managed to get broken open and then managed to go into it. Yeah, and that's when he records that he later realized that he was actually walking on 2 feet tall bat poop, and in one of the corners, as he turned, the lantern that he was holding rubbed the wall surface slightly, and that's when in the dull light he noticed a small tinge of green paint below the sheet of plaster that was visible, and slowly he managed to rub it, and as if it was waiting to be unveiled by him, an entire layer of plaster fell down, and he had his Archimedes moment to get the painting revealed. I mean, there is no end to his joy. Unfortunately, quite mysteriously, we lost this gentleman even before he finished his MPhil. In less than 6 months, 8 months time, he died. I mean, he was working in a lot of these enclosed spaces which weren't very healthy a space to breathe for long hours. Probably that caused some kind of a breathing complication and we lost him. His MPhil thesis never got completed. But this was a discovery of the century, in fact, I would say, for the historians of Tamil Nadu. Great art historians from all over India traveled to Thanjavur after this discovery, and Thanjavur was in the headlines of all popular magazines and newspapers for the next 1 week. And this discovery led to more such paintings being discovered. Each of them are valued so much. These are the external niches where you have various forms of Shiva enshrined. These are architectural members. Each of them have a different name. Each of them are a composition themselves. So they are placed at frequent intervals. Those are all different forms of Shiva. As you walk around, you get to see close to 20-25 different forms of Shiva as you walk around the shrine. Yeah, from the northern side, that's Shiva as Chakra Pradhana. That's Shiva standing there. That's Vishnu receiving the Sudarshana Chakra as a gift from Shiva. So he's through anywhere between 12 to 16 pieces of stones. It is 100% sure not one single piece of stone. It is not a monolith. It is not that through divine intervention a big globe of stone was ramped up all the way the 216 feet and all that. No. See, as a thumb rule, anything that sounds illogical put forward as the truth by YouTubers, just laugh at it and keep moving. Yeah, I mean, it's the same case for the shadow of the Vimanam falling down. The Vimanam is on earth. Yeah, it cannot fool the sun's movement. Yeah, it will cast its own shadow and it will, according to time, fall in whichever direction that it has got to fall. It does not definitely defy physics. It does not defy any scientific principles. It is an engineering wonder. It is an architectural marvel, no doubt about it. But nothing about the temple is illogical. It is as much as believing that the UFOs help building the temple. So please don't go for such tactics. Because I'm telling this because it will only belittle the efforts of the great architects and the masons and the king who endowed it and who foresee it. So if anything, it will only belittle them. So for their sake, please don't go by any of these YouTubers' versions. So this is a probable image which was digitally corrected by my friend and a very popular digital artist, Vishnu Ram, wherein he has managed to depict the first floor of the Vimanam also covered. Today, you don't see these walls today. In actual, if you go there, the first floor has no walls. They were all shelled during the French occupation of the temple. The French had occupied the temple for some time. So they were using, in fact, the shrine of Muruga was used as the ammunition storage. So, quite a part of it has fallen down. So this part of it has fallen down. So I had requested my friend to digitally give us an image of a restored view of how it would have looked probably. This is close to at least 100-120 feet long. This from there to here. What would have probably been the purpose of such a huge hall, which didn't have any deity there? There were no shrines there. Anybody's guess? I mean, what would have probably been the hall used for at the first floor level?
Dance floor.
Dance program. That was a good guess. That's a good guess. So we come to know through the inscription that there were close to 400 Devaradiyar who were employed in the temple to perform ritual dances for Shiva during the day-to-day course of rituals. So Dr. Professor Nagaswamy suggests that, his suggestion gave me a lot of dramatic visualization, so I would love to believe it. That's how it was. Probably all of them, imagine all of them getting themselves arranged there for in case of a Natyanjali, performing for Shiva, but a Natyanjali is performed in front of Shiva. If they are going to accommodate themselves in rows, there in the first floor, where exactly is Shiva? They were praying probably to the formless Shiva, who is visible at that level. And Dr. Nagaswamy takes it to a different level and he says, imagine the 400 Devadasis performing their dance there, performing a Pushpanjali, and slowly in a line going in and offering flowers in the ether space. All of it will shower on the lingam at the ground floor level. So for somebody who is watching it from the ground floor level, it will be like the celestials showering Shiva from the first floor level. A beautiful visualization, in fact. I wish it was how it was used, but we don't know that for sure. That's another very, very interesting feature that I would like you to have a look when you go there. This plank of stone, what looks like a semicircular plank of stone, depicts the Kailasha, the scene of Kailasha. You have Swami seated in the center, you have Devi on one side, that's Subramanya with Valli and Devayani, and that's Ganesha on the other side. You have the rows of celestials, Vishnu, Lakshmi, Brahma, Saraswati, all of them all praying to Shiva at the Kailasha Parvata as it looks. But what makes this very, very special is the topography of the Kailasha at which the sculptor had visualized 1,000 years back matches pretty much with how the Kailasha Parvatam looks today. I'm sure you would have all seen the picture of Kailasha as it is it's very popular on the internet. This topography, the cap of Kailasha has striking similarity to what is there in actual Kailasha today. So, how exactly did he visualize it? We know Appar Paraman attempted a Kailasha Yatre around the 7th century. He went very close to Kailasha, but the last stretch, Shiva advised that he cannot do it. So, he suggested him to have the darshan at Thiruvayyare. But for Appar, we are not sure about anybody else who had physically managed to have a darshan of Kailasha when this structure was built. Or probably somebody managed, I'm not sure. But this striking resemblance to the Kailasha Parvatam as seen in the front elevation of the Vimanam to what it is in actual is just too much for a 10th century structure. That's the Mula Murti without any Alankaram. This is from the archives again. So you have steel grills and ladders to perform the Abhishekam and Alankaram and floral decoration and all that. So that's how the Mula Murti looks. That's the Brahma Bhagam. Yeah, that's the Padmam that's shaped in the Brahma Bhagam. This is the Vishnu Bhagam. And that's the Rudra Bhagam. So any Shivalingam is split into these three parts. You have the Brahma Bhagam, which is the lotus pedestal down there. And that's the Vishnu Padam, where the Abhishekam water flows. And this is the Rudra Bhagam, the cylindrical actual Shivalingam. The statistics are there. I'll quickly probably read it out. The Shivalingam is close to 20 feet tall. Yeah, what is visible is around 13 feet. So the statistics are all there. He's 4.5 meter wide. The width of the Lingamurti is 4.5 meters wide. He's just massive. The shrine of Devi as Brihannayaki. She is from the Pandya period. We all know that the Pandyas and the Cholas were arch enemies, but when the Pandyas captured Thanjavur, they wanted their contribution in place. And probably from the land of Meenakshi, they wanted to build the shrine of Devi in the campus. And so you have the shrine of Brihannayaki standing in all her glory, commanding, super tall, and you just want to keep looking at her. Very, commanding the look is. Yeah, she's the most apt consort for somebody like Brihadishwara. So the commanding nature is inbuilt in her. That's a beautiful poetic structure for Muruga in the temple built by the Nayaka king. This temple's description alone deserves a 1 hour session. We are not getting into it. Just be informed that the shrine of Subramanya is from the Nayaka period. Extremely intricate. You will see the language of sculpture and the language of architecture different from the main shrine. So that's how you differentiate between different cultures' architectural component. The Nandi there, going by the style and by records, this is from the Nayaka period. Yeah, he is not the Nandi installed during Rajaraja's period. The Nandi from Rajaraja's period is kept right there, if you can see, in the far end of the corridor. Yeah, you have to push yourself near the wall, the compound wall on the southern side. Yeah, one straight line from the shrine of the present day Nandi, right there is where the original Nandi installed during the time of Rajaraja was kept. He is definitely a beautiful, a Chola period splendor. Yeah, so he's to be installed as the main Nandi for big temple. I'm sure you can imagine how much of a work that the sculptors would have given importance to it to get a beautifully done Nandi. This Nandi is of course from the Nayaka period, and the paintings are from the Maratha period. As a thumb rule, anywhere in India, ancient paintings you suddenly see blue pigment. That's a Victorian influence. Before the imperial power came in, we never had blue in the Indian palette, in the traditional Indian palette. So if you see this indigo blue, this is from the cacti that they managed to get and for dyeing fabric that came in. The Nandi Mandapam is from the Vijayanagara Nayaka period. So the Nandi is there, and the paintings from Maratha period. In the Chola period, you had the walls and the bases of the Gopurams that were used as the 10th century Amar Chitra Katha, where you had stories told through sculptures. Now, this is the story of Kannappa Nayanar. Yeah, the important scenes in the life history of Kannappa Nayanar, he has managed to depict. That's Nayanar with a hunting bow in his hand. Yeah, This is the first sight of Shiva as he went into the forest. You can see the 100 dogs accompanying him. There are 4 dogs with which he came in. So all of this fits very well with the description from Periya Puranam. So for people who didn't have access to Periya, in fact Periya Puranam was not authored during when the temple was built. So there is good probability that Chekidar Peruman would have definitely visited the temple. He would have measured the entire length and breadth of the temple and stood in front of these panels which tells us the stories of the Nayanmars and whatnot. Yeah, so that's the temple of Shiva which he first saw. That's the Lingamurti there, and that's Kannapar kneeling down, managing to pluck his eyes to stick it on the face of Shiva. Yeah, to kind of transplant it, and that's the Shivalingam, and you can actually see the hand of Shiva slightly projecting from there. So Shekidar says that the left hand, which was bangled, came out and caught his hand when he managed to pluck his second eye also. So, even before Shekidar gives us all those descriptions, you have it depicted in stone. So the life history of the Nayanmars have been in continuous record in stone and literature and whatnot. So you have more such story panels. Each of it is from the Puranas. You have Kirartha Arjunya, you have Tripura Samhara Murti's story, you have Valli Thiruvanam, many such stories. Markandeya's story of Kala Samharam, it is all depicted, and the inspiration is definitely from the sacred verses of the Tevaram. Because these are the stories that keep repeating in the Tevaram. The story of Markandeya, the story of Ravana, the story of Tripura Samhara. These all get repeated in the Tevaram. So that becomes the inspiration for the sculptors to paint them. That's Shiva coronating Chandikeshwara as the Nirmalya Murti. That's Chandikeshwara seated there. And Shiva has a garland with which he promotes him to be the Nirmalya Murti. So the story of Chandesha Nayana. Inscriptions, I'm just mentioning a few. There is a very detailed inscription about the Tevaradiyar employed in the temple. It is in fact to me the first ever Excel sheet that was done, because it has several columns and information beautifully classified under columns. You have serial numbers, you have the names of the Tevaradiyar, you have their the native town and the place of birth, the town where they were employed before being transferred to the big temple, and the last column has a detailed address with door number, street name and the quarters.
My God.
For 400 of them. All of this documented in such precision. It can actually generate itself into a nice Excel sheet. That's how it is, columns and rows, and you have these put with titles. So 400 of them. And as if that's not enough, you need the musicians to sing for them. You need the instrumentalists to play for them. Yeah, you had the Oduars, a separate band of singers, so they were there. And then you have the Nattuvanas. And let me tell you, the hairdressers for these Tevaradiyas, they also find a mention. Yeah, the barbers for the male equivalent find a mention. When I say a mention, it is not just their name. It will talk about the endowment created to pay them on a monthly basis. So each of the ritual in the temple will have a supporting endowment. You will have a piece of land somewhere in the Chola country, the address for which will be given, the boundary for which will be given. Yeah, today if you know the address, you can go and reclaim the land. That's the amount of detailing that has gone into it. To the last person, yeah, till the hairdressers, and so the land from which the monthly remuneration has to be paid as measured quantity of paddy, that will also be there. So it's mostly measured quantity of paddy and probably a few coins. That's how it is. Yeah, and then there are details about the bronzes that were given, close to 32 different forms of Shiva. Dakshinamurti, Nataraja, Bhairava, Veerabhadra, Lingodbhava, all of them in bronze. To the best of my knowledge, till date I have not seen a Lingodbhava in bronze from the Chola period. This temple had one. Extremely unfortunate, we have lost almost all of them. Hardly one or two of the Chola bronzes still exist in the temple, but the details for each of it will be in such precision. For example, if you say Dakshinamurti, the pedestal's measurement will be given. And then the posture of the deity will be described as the one who is seated with his left leg folded, right leg resting on a Muyalagan, who is so many inches tall in relation to the pedestal. So there will be this relative dimensioning system in place. We didn't have inches, we didn't have centimeters. So a kind of relative dimensioning. Every time a temple is newly built, a specific unit for measurement will be constructed. And that will be the casual distance between the two legs of the king or the person who's endowing the temple. It will be measured. 10 feet he's got to walk, and an average will be taken as the regular interval between two steps. That will be made as the fixed unit for the temple construction. So every wall will be, each of the dimension, the wall will be probably 300 times that dimension. The height will be 600 times that dimension. So these dimensions will be marked in ropes. with knots made, and it'll just be lying there, be tied. And as the blueprint gets transferred into construction, they'll have to use these ropes with knots at frequent intervals to measure so many times by this scale. And in the case of Periyakovil, it was called as Adal Vallan Tirukkol. Rajaraja never had it in his name, it was in the name of Nataraja. Adal Vallan, literally Nataraja, the one who has mastered the art of dance. So in his name the scale existed. So each of the bronze, and it will talk about the headgear. For example, if it's a Nataraja bronze, all that goes into the ornamentation of the head in the bronze image will be discussed. A kapalam, an umattam flower, the kokku feathers, all of it. So such detailing that you can actually cast them today. Yeah, if only it can be, if the expense can be taken by somebody, they can all be casted again today. That's how much of detailing had gone into it. So when one bronze is discussed, what will accompany it what all will accompany are the details about the jewelry, which were also gifted by different people. Details about the vessels in silver and gold for the offerings, for the rituals, for the abhishekam and all that. Details about the daily floral offerings and the details about the garden from which the flowers have got to be plucked, the person who is going to garland them and then offer. Each of the deity will have this. And for the Mula Murti, even the ingredients that goes into the water, the scented water for the ablution of the deity will be discussed. And that goes to the level of telling how many buds of Shanbagam flower has got to be added to. So flowers as buds, fully flowered, petals, only the pollen from it, all of it goes into preparing the water on a daily basis for such a big murti, and the ingredients list is in place. Cooked food, special delicacies, bhakshanams to be made, sweets and savories, all in place. Jewelry I've told, temple services, so each of them, starting from the chief priest, all the way up to probably the servicemen, I don't know, all of them, they are all there. Their payrolls, their names, Payroll doesn't mean it's always in cash, it will always be in measured quantities of paddy. So from which agricultural plot the cultivated grain goes into paying this particular individual. So that has got to be given. The banana mat, the Ganesha inside, the Arunmozhi Vinayakar I showed you. So he has got to be offered 150 bananas every day according to the inscription. That would be a tedious task for the temple priest or the accountant or anybody there to collect 150 bananas every day and to offer him. So Rajaraja came up with this very beautiful micromanagement system wherein he pulled in the local mercantile of merchants, banana merchants of Thanjavur, because each commodity will have its own set of merchants, right? And they will have a small association with which they will be working. So each of it, we have the gold guild, we have the silver guild, we have the craftsman guild. So such guild, there was one for the banana merchants. So Rajaraja involves them. And if anybody in the entire Chola country, they will be the best people to go for to ensure 150 bananas every day. They will get bananas from wherever it is and they can make sure that 150 bananas are offered to the temple. So Rajaraja asks somebody, the donor, to deposit a corpus quantity of gold in the account of the Association of Banana Merchants Guild. So that's an association, they'll have a guild, which will mean there'll be an account for them, a banking system will be in place. So in that account, the endowment created, whoever is the donor, the philanthropist, will have to deposit measured quantity of corpus gold, and the measurement of the gold is done by reverse calculation with inflation taken into account, because gold, Rajaraja knew, is never going to lose its value. If anything, with years to come, it is only going to go, it's going to inflate itself, and there will be the general inflation also. So taking all that into consideration, close to 14.5% annual interest, the calculated quantity of gold was deposited by the donor. So it's one time for him and he gets rid of it. So he needn't worry about whether the 150 bananas came there every day. For him it is assured. For the merchants guild there, they have such contacts with the king, they are now catering to the king's account, and they have such corpus of gold in place. The gold will be invested in something and the interest that it is going to fetch should go into offering this 150 bananas. Imagine such offerings for very many deities there. The oilmongers guild will be there in place, definitely the vegetable market, definitely the silk yarns and the cotton manufacturers, all of them, the potterers, everybody, every single occupation will have a guild which will be associated with the temple, and in a way or two, their connection with the temple is established, they get some business and it keeps going. That's a banana mat for the Ganapati. And then there are later period inscriptions in various scripts, including the Marathi kings whose inscriptions are in a script called Modi. It's a written script for Marathi language. So the Modi inscriptions are also there. And then finally some myth busting. the shadow casting happens very much. Yeah, there is, in most cases you will find a guide telling that the shadow is never casted, standing right at the shadow of the Vimana. Yeah, that's how we are, and we just take it for granted. So then you have the Nandi, he does not grow. I know people who have been seeing him for like 60, 70 years. Yeah, he's always remained the same height, and there has never been a case of nailing on his hump to make sure that there is no concept of crucifixion and all with us. So the Nandi was never nailed. That's another popular myth. The mysterious European guy, if you can see in this picture, do you see a European guy with a hat there and a tie bow and the beard and the features? So if you can, bother your neck a bit when you go around the Vimanam on the northern side, at the second tier level, there'll be this guy like peeping out of the window. Yeah, typically, completely he's European, the hat and all that, the fashion is very European. And there is this mystery about him. And the popular YouTubers again, if you go to your rescue there, they'll have stories about how the architects of Rajaraja knew what is going to happen 800 years from then. And they had visualized all this fashion even before it became popular in Europe. And they have got him, they managed to put him there, is what the theory that's propagated. As I told you, nothing is illogical there. Everything has its own logic in place. So such superstitions have no place in history. This is probably an outcome of the renovation that happened around the 18th century when the Dutch, several of these imperial powers had already become popular in India. And the artists, they are the first influencers. They know what looks very new and what is trending. Yeah, and you would want the trending thing to happen as your contribution in any art production. So whoever this unknown plastering guy was, the artist was, thought that that the hat and the beard and the tie bow and the collar looks very different, and if anything, he can definitely find a place in the Vimana. And so he managed to plaster that image and he is put in there. So there is nothing like the Rajaraja sculptors knew about the Europeans going to colonize India 800 years from then and all that. So this is from the Nayaka period. And there is a story about the image of an old lady who sold buttermilk as the temple was being built, and she was very poor, and the buttermilk, whatever she had to sell and make money, it is believed that she offered to people, and how Rajaraja actually had a statue of her erected in the temple, and how her spirit goes around. So all sorts of stories you have about the temple. Even about Rajaraja's spirit is the most recent. Yeah, that he committed suicide. Random thoughts. Nothing like that. The temple is fully under worship. I have not had any such experiences of encountering any spirits and all in the temple. So about the buttermilk story and all that is a later thing. And the best is about how exactly the Vimanam was built. About a 5-kilometer long ramp that was laid, on which the stone and all that was carried by elephants. Now, if anything, the ramp has, as according to the theory, was made from one direction. What will happen to the remaining 3 directions? Did they have ramps from all sides? Secondly, the inclination of the ramp when it is laid can be only to that level. You have close to 16 tiers, which will mean the inclination of the ramp was corrected with every successive layers. Yeah, that will mean like production cost and relaying the ramp for like 5-kilometer stretch. And please, just because there is a small settlement called Sarapallam somewhere near Thanjavur, which was enough for the word Saram, which means an inclined plane, for our own gossip mongers to come up with such theory that from that village a Saram was actually erected, and they managed to lift all the stone up, rolled the stone up the ramp. Worst in case, this theory was accepted by none but the BBC, and their documentary stands testimony to this. And in some cases, even in academic discussions, when we say that this is a flaw, people aren't ready to accept. But the theory is about, still, how exactly was it built? If not ramps, how did they manage to lift it? The only theory that is academically accepted and what makes some sense is the lingam was enshrined after building the platform, and after the installation of the murti, the construction of the temple should have started. First, they would have got done with the 2 walls at the lower level. Yeah, first 2 stories, 2 walls, the concentric walls. After which, they should have managed to bring in a lot of raw earth, rammed it around the shrine, and cover the shrine as it was built, and managed to come up with a ramp which was spiral and not an inclined plane. So, like a spiral ramp being wider at the base, and as they managed to build, the ramp should have developed as a spiral around the Vimana. So, with successive layers being filled, inside and outside, they should have filled it with soil, rammed it, and built the Vimanam all the way up. And when it was completed, it could have probably looked like a big mountain of sand, soil, and that should have been cleared to bring out the temple, and the soil put inside should have been excavated, and the temple should have been brought back. But for that, there is no other logical way of using pulley and fulcrum and raising. I mean, I'm sure there cannot be a pulley which can lift such heavy stone all the way up to like 200 feet and all. So if anything, this sounds the most appropriate story, and there is, the list of myths are like endless. So if you know any, you can just add on to it. I can try and tell you what is it in actual. Any other myths that I forgot that I left? Yeah.
Not investment, general queries. Where did the
Stone
come
okay,
from?
if anything, the closest point of procurement for stone should have been near Pudukkottai, which is an hour's drive today from Thanjavur. Technically, it's like the next important town after Thanjavur to the southwest. Pudukkottai has enough hills today. It's not just a random guess. The texture of the granite that you get in Pudukkottai hills today matches pretty much with the samples that you see here. So, and the Pudukkottai hills are all cut and nosed out, and so it seems like that's from where they would have quarried it, because no other direction from Thanjavur has such stone deposits at all. So from Pudukkottai, probably.
Viralimalai, is it?
Viralimalai towards Madurai. This is towards Pudukkottai in the side. Viralimalai is slightly farther. Trichy Tandi Pono. This is like Pudukkottai is close by. And it's an ancient town, so the connecting road should have existed from the Chola period.
Where they transported
Elephants. Elephants could have been the only possible load bearers to transport it. Maybe locally inside the temple they would have used bullock carts for smaller pieces, and probably a kind of a ramp to pull it. So whatever solve load bearing they would have done. But majorly the roles of elephants is to be understood. And in fact, the number of elephants employed and the copper used is why probably the Cholas were keen about the control over Sri Lanka. Yeah, so I mean, Indian Deccan Plateau isn't popular for these elephants. Till date, the Sri Lankan elephants are quite popular. They are very strong, and copper deposits anywhere in India isn't what is enough to make all these Chola bronzes. Sri Lanka has the best copper deposits, and those copper deposits were discovered from the prehistoric times. We get small copper artifacts from prehistoric times. That's like several thousands of years before the Cholas even came in. So the reason for controlling almost 2/3 of Sri Lanka till the end should have been the wealthy copper deposits there to make all those stunning bronzes and the elephants that they managed to get from there to get all their temples built.
Yeah, Thanjavur district itself, there is no hills.
Yeah, you don't see
can't
hills.
get stones, and I've grown.
No temple in the Chola region is built on a
I
hill.
come from the district, so it has to be from somewhere outside.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So technically, I'm done with the session. Thanjavur is one of its kind, of course. In the long-running history of mankind, in engineering and technology discipline, this is definitely a turning point, at least in Indian engineering schools. There have been attempts in the recent past to rebuild it, mimic it, and build something of this scale in other parts of India also, but none of it succeeded. Not getting into the myths part of it, but there seemed to be a jinx associated with Thanjavur, some of which I also experienced. People who get too emotional and too close with the big temple at Thanjavur and get it into an academic mode to do some kind of a research about it and publish it seem to be, I mean, there is a jinx. I mean, they meet an end quite mysteriously, and so did S.K. Govindaswamy and several other luminaries who worked on this temple. I don't want to name them, but that being said, there is a strong belief in fact, a practice that none of the sitting politicians visit the big temple during their tenure. It is observed as a norm in India. You can Google out for that. None of the sitting chief ministers, none of the serving prime ministers, even big names when they visited Thanjavur, this is like the temple that one should visit. A bureaucrat or a leader of that the cadre visits. This is the place that they should be visiting. The depiction of local culture, the depiction of local tradition. So it is the obvious place, but there is a cautious decision, in fact, not to visit it. That have today gotten extended into the bureaucrats also. So any district collector appointed to Thanjavur, they go to Punnenallur Mariamman temple, which is equally popular, equally powerful, an ancient deity, a goddess, but categorically avoid coming into the temple. Though the welfare of the temple comes under their jurisdiction. They avoid entering into the temple, so all the meetings and all that will be held in their office and decisions taken, and it's just carried over.
Temple is saved.
So there are certain issues like that also, but that being said, this is one of the Thiruvisaipa Padal Petra Sthalam for the Shaivites, and Rajaraja Cholan wanted himself to be called as Shivapada Shekaran, and this is a repository of 10th century art, architecture, inscriptions, sculptures. Yes, please.
You didn't mention about Varahi. Yeah.
Okay, the Varahi was excavated when the temple, one of the temple renovations was happening around 80s, 90s. If you have any seniors at home, you might ask them. Varahi was not, what she was back in the 60s or 70s. Varahi as a deity is popular today. All of a sudden, I see Varahi everywhere. I see Varahi with everybody. With all due respect, the Varahi shrine in Periyakovil, she just became popular in the last 1.5 decades. And probably she was a part of the Saptamatrika panel, which is like a row of 7 virgin goddesses, 7 mother goddesses, each representing one of the popular Hindu god. You have Brahma. The feminine form of Brahma is identified as Brahmi. Feminine equivalent of Maheshwara is Maheshwari. Feminine equivalent of Kumara, Subramanya, is Kaumari. Feminine equivalent of Indra is Indrani. So in that list you have Varaha's equal counterpart as Varahi. So she is the central image in the list of 7 mother goddesses who are seated on a pedestal in worship. And Shaiva Agamas prescribe the worship of these 7 mother goddesses, accompanied by Ganesha and Veerabhadra on either side. So it's like 9 deities put together in worship. This temple today hasn't got a shrine for the Saptamatrikas, and that she was excavated on the southern Prakara. Probably furthermore excavation can help us find the remaining deities also. But she is, as I'm told, partly chiseled and not in the way to be worshipped, but somehow people go very excited over Varahi in the recent times. We need everything to be done quickly, right? So the worship of Varahi, you're promised that all your worries vanish like that, and so she has become popular. That much I can say, but again, the YouTubers have taken her to a level of the patron goddess of Rajaraja, and how Rajaraja used to worship her before his daily chore starts, and even before the wars that he attended, he always worshipped to her. Humbug. There is absolutely no reference to anything of that sort that Rajaraja did. If anything, he would have worshipped Perudayar before his wars or wherever he was. I think he believed the blessings of God then. So there is no record about he visiting the Varahi shrine before his wars. That much I'm sure.
Any underground pathways there?
Any temple from those times, especially something which is in the capital city, will have subterranean channels. It needn't necessarily mean that it is connecting Thanjavur to Rameshwaram or Srirangam or anything like that. Such channels are not even possible.
Maybe to the palace.
Probably. Yeah, Shivaganga, that is all there. Nobody has managed it. As a norm, I think when the ASI took over these temples, for safety reasons, they just studied it, documented it, and sealed the vaults. So there is. But one thing I'm sure, none of these subterranean channels can run for like hundreds of kilometers and all. You will have so many water bodies, you will have perennial rivers. It's not possible to cross it. If anything, with the palace, probably. And there is this guess that the palace of Rajaraja existed where Shivagangai Punga stands today. So probably there was one. But I don't think anything is existing today or anything has been documented. You have a channel that can be seen in Gangaikonda Cholapuram. There is one on the northern side of the shrine. That is still, it's not active, but it's at least, you can see the subterranean channel.
Is that one replica of this one? Slightly.
That was, no, I wouldn't call it a replica, but an attempt that wanted to come somewhere close to it. But it is a beauty in its own self. And that was Rajendra's, so probably he wanted to do something as illustrious as his father. But that's more what can be called as the feminine equivalent of the big temple Thanjavur. This is massive, this is strong, and this is sturdy. Don't take these as gender specific terms or anything like that, just to be politically right. This is like massive and strong, but that is like has its own very intricate gentleness in it, and so that's why it's like called.
If that has got subterranean, most probably this would have had. That's what
probably for the scale of the temple that it is. But mostly they were not connecting channels, but they were vaults, probably to safeguard jewelry, the coffers of the temples probably and all that. I mean, personally speaking, I don't want to mention the names of the temples, but in 2 or 3 such ancient temples, I've seen such coffers existing just next to the shrine where Bhikshadana is kept. The mendicant form of Shiva, Bhikshadana bronze, wherever he is kept, there is generally a vault for the temple. And in one particular temple, a very popular temple, it is still in use. That's why the temple jewelry is still kept and it is safeguarded. Stone vaults there.
And there was another thing about, Kalasam being covered with any...
Yeah, the Vimanam you mean, being covered with gold.
Was it gold?
Ponnal Veindu, there are fragmentary inscriptions that were discovered. One of it talks about Kalasatte Ponnal Veindu, but it's a fragmentary inscription, it's chiseled, it's cut in places. So there is a theory that the entire Sri Vimanam was covered in gold. Because Ponnal Veindu comes, some argue that it was probably only the Kalasam, but some say that it is Rajaraja and they already had the tradition of covering Chidambaram and Srirangam and the popular temples, the Vimanam in gold. It couldn't have been a challenge for him to cover this also in gold, but if it were, I'm just trying to visualize the dazzling look that it would have had.
Where does Rajaraja Chola rest?
Even where he was interred probably. No clue about it. No clue at all about it. About this thing happening in Udayalur, which is very popular on the internet, there is no reference to that being Rajaraja's final place of rest. There is a theory that probably he spent his last days at Padayare, which is near Kumbakonam, which was the erstwhile Chola capital, where probably all his ancestors lived, and so he wanted to stay there and spend his last few years. That's quite possible. But this name, Shivapada Shekaran, is given to a small settlement near Padayare. One of the settlements there is called as Shivapada Shekara Chaturvedi Mangalam. Yeah, that was the only key word which had helped develop all these theories about one random Shivalingam in somebody's agricultural field to be the place where Rajaraja was put to rest. Yeah, there is absolutely no epigraphic evidence or literary evidence or even any inscriptions in copper plates or nothing at all about where he was probably interred. In fact, we don't know the date of his death. We are not sure. We only know when he probably stepped down as being a king, because Rajendra's inscription starts appearing at a particular point. It's only logical that Rajaraja would have stepped down by then. So we can only say that he was active till 1014 as a king. But he definitely lived beyond that, because he becomes a Shiva devotee and spends his time in Shiva Puja and all that. So that's when he's called as Shivapada Shekaran. But we're not sure about when he breathed his last. Forget where he was interred.
And how come you would have been buried? You would have been
in good probability he would have been buried because he attains Shiva Diksha. So the agamic tradition is that one who is initiated into Shiva Diksha has got to be interred, buried, and on top of him a Shivalingam has got to be installed, and a small temple has got to be built, and the Shaiva priests belonging to the Kadamukha school of Shaivam will be engaged in performing the rituals on a day-to-day basis. We have a few such tomb temples. We do have some temples, one for Panchavanma Devi and Arinye Shodar, one of Rajaraja's ancestors who lost his life in a battle near Vellur. So there is a temple built, not in his memory, but on the place where he was buried. So that's been the tradition. In the case of Rajaraja, no, we are not sure about it at all.
We're yet to find out.
Maybe, sometime touch wood, sometime soon. Anything else?
Just a question on the Nataraja. I mean, we all know that that is the only existing bronze from his time. So I have heard many people saying that it's been kept on the first level of the temple for a long time, and they used to worship from there. I mean, wherever the Karanas
Sculptures are there.
So is that
not quite possible, because there hasn't been a floor for the first floor. Yeah, the first floor where the opening is there, around which people go and walk. You know, the ether space. There is no provision for a flooring there. So I don't see a point where Nataraja could have probably been placed. Secondly, in Shaivagama temples, Nataraja is always placed facing south. So if he was kept at the first floor level facing east, it does not make any sense. So the existing place was, the structure where he is kept today is from a later period, of course. That's from a later period. The bronze belongs to the Chola period. Anything else? Any other queries, comments, suggestions?
I want to really thank you for giving so much of information, and it's really a big round of applause. If you want to
don't know about this, would you recommend any literature or books?
There is a very good book authored by Shri Kudavayil Balasubramaniam. It's titled Sri Rajarajeshwaram. It's this big a book. I think the English translation is also available. That's highly prescribed, I would say. You can just blindly believe what he said. It's all factual. He has been there in person, studied it inch by inch and documented it. The book comes with very good photographs. That's available online. Place an order for him, right? There is one on the mural paintings alone, which is another highly recommended book, authored by Sri P.S. Sriraman. It just says Chola Murals. It's easy to remember. That's a highly recommended book. It has very good quality photos and in-depth discussions about the subject, the technique of painting, the style and all that. Yeah, I think Kudavayil Balasubramaniam's book covers it in total. There is nothing that he has left unattended in that one book. I would say that's the most authentic source.
Thank you so much for this incredible talk. I think you said that this temple makes you feel humbled, but I think today we've been humbled by both the temple and you. For such a popular temple where there's so much information out there, a lot of it is misleading and sometimes inaccurate, a lot of it. But to the amount of research, time and effort that you put in to curate this, I think it's just unbelievable. And the entire talk it's full of facts, it's full of references, and every single piece of detail, you just back it up with evidence. It's just so well thought out, you can't really have questions. So I wanted to thank you, and also it was a visual treat to see the beauty, the greatness, the symmetry. Every minute detail is a treasure, it's a gem. So thank you so much for delivering this speech today. Thank you all for
Once again, my sincere thanks to the Shaiva Youth UK for putting this together in very short notice, and the administration of Wimbledon Ganapati Temple for all the support that they've extended. Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you for so there is free downstairs, and you can stay connected with Shaiva Youth UK through our Instagram page. Thank you.